Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Stratagoy video. Ryan here with Jonas again, and I think we still are sitting in the situation where my voice is in a worse place than yours. I don't know, I haven't asked you yet today, but I've been talking my brain off today, so I'm going to plow through this one, and then I'm going to a concert, and hopefully I don't end up singing my voice out totally,
I
but
was
we'll,
just
we'll
gonna
see what
say
happens.
concerts are usually the place where you get to rest your voice, right?
Yeah, well, kinda. And I'm going with Nick, so who
Okay.
knows what to expect. Yeah. So anyway, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm looking forward to our review of today.
Yeah. So we had Seraphon yesterday. Today is Slaves.
Yeah.
This week is evidently not going in the order I expected because tomorrow is going to be Iron Jaws.
Yeah. They're mixing it up
Evidently.
for the last
So
week.
yeah, trying to throw us content creators off our comfort out of our comfort zone here. But anyway, yeah. So guys, just once again reiterate, thanks so much for all the support. We've been seeing a lot of attention for the channel, and thanks for sharing it to people out there. We're getting close to 3,000 subscribers, so I'm hoping sometime at the beginning of fourth edition we're going to be crossing that threshold. So keep it going. Thanks so much for everything you've already done for us, and let us know how we're doing. Okay. Jonas, you ready to jump in?
Oh yeah. Let's go.
All,
Battle traits.
all right. So we were just talking about it. Jonas, you said that you don't have too much experience playing against slaves, but I've got it's probably one of my three worst matchups for the type of armies I like to build. Do you want to fill in the audience for any of your side of this experience real quick?
Yeah, so the most experience that I've got is with the Vanguard build. Also, the only competitive build that I could think of on the top of my head, if you would ask me now. So I don't necessarily am too much in touch with the third edition slaves sit rep, I would say. I knew them quite well during second edition because I had an opponent that played them for a very brief period, but I was very interested in myself. So I already mapped out how I would build my slaves army, and I ended up not doing it, but I did a lot of research for that. So that's where I'm sitting. But yeah, the fact that you play against them quite a lot makes this much more interesting for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm cards on the table. I'm going to admit that I kind of hate playing against slaves. At least I hate playing against the build that is the tanky one. So
Yeah.
some amount of Guard Knights with a Nurgle banner, and then maybe Archeon or something like that. Like I just don't like playing against it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mind almost any other build, but the other builds just didn't come up that much.
Yeah.
There was a build that a meme build, but that was actually decently strong with Splintered Fang. When Splintered Fang is just profile, it's one of the Warcry warbands. They're probably going away, but they had a super big glow up in the third edition book, and just had you could stack them to the moon, and then
Yeah.
there was a faction that brought them back.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious to see how the army's going to play now. We're probably looking at the battle traits right now. I don't always know what Jonas is on here, and basically what they did here is they streamed down how the army works. The army was probably one of the more modular options that we had in third edition, at least by the end, in the sense that you had all kinds of things that interacted with which gods the guys worshipped. So we can look at the list on the right here just to kind of see. There was the four chaos gods. Remember, Skaven didn't count, and I don't expect he'll ever come into the picture anyway. The Great Horned Rat or whatever he's
Yeah.
called. And then we had a fifth that was Undivided. Now, Undivided has been developed a lot lately. The other four are obvious, but Undivided was basically kind of like all of your Marauders, if you wanted them to be that, and then definitely most of the Warcry warbands.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Plus, with this kind of weird release of the Dark Oath stuff that came out only about a month ago, they've injected an even stronger Undivided sense in the army. But of course, all those rules came out, and then they were barely usable for what's to come. Now, Bellicor was also kind of the poster boy for Undivided, but we're going to see that maybe that's more or less of a thing. I'm curious to see if there's anything that leans more into the Bellicor's old faction, but let's get into the abilities first, and then we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
So while we're at it, let's talk about the Marks of Chaos ability. Friendly Slaves to Darkness units, all of them, have one of the following effects based on the Mark of Chaos keyword they have. So what I'd like to do first before we go through these is scroll down to a couple war scrolls. So let's look at like Bellicor real quick. If you look at his bottom line here, you see that his keyword is undivided. If we scroll down yet again to the Demon Prince, we see on the upper left-hand side here that you have a choice of a mark of chaos, and that could be any of the 5 choices. And if we scroll down to like Chaos Knights, they also have those 5 choices. The Marauders, though, don't have a choice. They're default undivided on the bottom there. So what do I expect? I expect, if we go back to the battle traits, that the only units that are going to be particularly restricted with this are going to be the ones that have to either be one specific thing or that can't be one specific thing. So, for example, Khorne doesn't allow for wizardry. So your Chaos Sorcerer Lords are not probably going to have the choice, but they'll
Yeah.
probably still have the other 4. And this is basically how it's always worked. Let's look at the buffs that are on here. So if you're undivided, you add 1 to wound rolls for combat attacks targeting heroes or monsters. It's worth pointing out that this army just doesn't really have shooting profiles, so that's basically like saying all attacks almost. Then we've got for Khorne, add 1 to attacks characters that can melee weapons for the rest of the turn if the unit charged. Now, obviously, we have counter charge now, which means they get some more use out of this. That's the same as what it was. I'll talk about undivided in a minute. Tzeentch has a 4+ ward against mortal damage inflicted by spell abilities and abilities from manifestations. Keep in mind that actually, I had written this in my notes that manifestations attack profiles, which a lot of the predatory ones have, aren't abilities. But now I changed my mind. Maybe because it's a fight ability, it still counts. So you
Yeah, I
might have
think
a
it
4+.
does. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be cool, I guess. This used to be a 6+ spell ignore, so this is way better in my opinion. Now, I don't know if you're going to take it over the other ones, but I still think it's good. Nurgle is.
Well, Ryan, just quickly for the manifestations, it depends how you read that ability, obviously, because it says against mortal damage inflicted by spell abilities and abilities used by manifestations, and a normal attack profile of a manifestation might not necessarily inflict mortal damage.
Yeah, unless it has crit
Yeah,
mortals.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's, I guess, where that question lies.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, good point. Nurgle's got -1 from wound rolls for combat attacks that target the unit. If I'm not mistaken, if they used to have some ability somewhere in the book that would just turn off, or it would make -1 to wound rolls, period, whether they targeted that unit or not. But this is specifically, they might have FAQ'd that. I don't know if I've got that right, but there were a number of different sources of this stuff before. And then Slaanesh has +1 to run and charge rolls. Now, it's worth pointing out here that what these used to give was, in addition to these rules, we'll talk about anything that changed. They also had every one of the heroes could do a certain command ability. Now, for those slaves players out there, please chime in down below. Let us know if any of those command abilities were particularly strong. Like Tzeentch had a teleport one that was techie, but I don't know how often it went used. I'm curious to see what people say. I think some of them might have been used more than others, so let us know in the comments below. But they did all lose a command ability. The biggest change, I think, here, I already mentioned the Tzeentch one, is just the undivided one, which used to give, and this helps segue into the next thing we're going to talk about, it used to give all undivided units the Eye of the Gods ability, and if they already had it, then they got to re-roll on the table whenever they generated it. So we'll come back to that in a second. But Jonas, what do you think about these buffs? Do you think they're strong with this? Do you feel like it's as much of a plug and play modular, do what you want with your army kind of thing, or
Yeah,
does it interest
I
you?
love how this looks so far. I thought it was going to be way less flexible than it is now. I figured with the changes to army composition, as in you would have to select a hero and then kind of add units to that hero's regiment. I almost expected them to say, like, you pick a mark for your hero and all of its regiment units have to adhere to that same mark. But that's not the case, and I really like how flexible it still is. All of the buffs seem good to me. Obviously, some of them are standouts. I think you'll still see a lot of Nurgle Knights, Ryan.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's none of them really saying to me that it's useless. I think so far I'm least attracted by the undivided buff, but that kind of depends how the meta evolves, right? How many heroes and monsters are you actually gonna see, or maybe Tzeentch. But Nurgle, Slaanesh, and Khorne are very juicy. And I do wonder if Archeon still has all of those keywords like Khorne, Nurgle, and Tzeentch in his case. Is he getting all of those buffs? Probably. the thing on top here kind of makes me think like he should be getting a specific ability to make sure that he gets all of those buffs, because it says friendly slaves to darkness units have one of the following effects based on the mark of chaos keyword they have. So I wonder whether they're gonna explain that for Archeon and his abilities.
Yeah. I think you used to have to choose. Yeah, in the new version of Archeon, you had to choose at the beginning of the game which one you're going to go with.
Ah, okay, there it is. Yeah.
That might still be there.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause you're right, it's pretty strong. But honestly, I don't think it's. I mean, you could also account for that in his profile and kind of pull some stats in different directions so that he can get all these things, but then it makes him what you're paying for.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know which one I would choose, whether having all of them is better and they account for that, or But yeah, it's still interesting. Honestly, this plays almost the same as what it did, except you lost the command abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Go ahead.
go for it.
I was
Uh,
gonna say I would take the Eye of the Gods stable. I'll cover it first because I think your voice needs a little break.
sure, go for it.
Yeah, so Eye of the Gods, once per turn, end of any turn now, which is interesting. This ability has gone through so many iterations, Ryan, that I really cannot remember what the latest iteration is. So I'm sure you'll tell me after we're done covering this ability quickly. But you actually target any of your units that have destroyed an enemy unit. Excluding beasts and non-hero monsters. I actually don't think there are a lot of just monsters in, well, you've got the Sphinx and all that, so there probably are. But they can all get the Eye of the Gods, and then they will make a reward roll of d6 for each of those units that have destroyed an enemy unit, and you apply the corresponding effect. Now, there's something cool here. You can re-roll the reward roll if you don't like it. But then if you roll a 1, you would inflict d3 mortal damage. Now, it'll probably say in the core rules that you can only re-roll. You cannot re-roll or re-roll. But if it doesn't say that, you would be able to keep rolling. But I don't think you will. But as of right now, it doesn't say anything about not being able to do that. So you've 6 effects. The first one is Snubbed by the Gods, which is no effect. Or if you've done a reroll, that's going to be inflicting d3 mortal damage to you. But the other 5 are kind of nice. So the second ability isn't great, but it's kind of good for all of your monsters and your heroes. Not your hero monsters, obviously, because they cannot get it. But you will heal 3 to the target. Not d3, but just flat out 3, which is nice. Unnatural Grace is kind of a lot better. You add 1 to hit rolls for the target's combat attacks for the rest of the battle. This could stack, as far as I know, but you cannot never go above 1 better than your current hit score anyway. So it's like having all-out attack on yourself all of the time, and it's only necessary to stack this if your opponent has some ways to give you -1 to hit and balance that out. Then you've got the Lurid Aura for the 4 here. The target has a ward of 6, and if you already have a 6-up ward, you get a 5-up ward instead, which is nice. There are quite a lot of 6-up wards for the demony and bigger stuff here, so 5-up wards aren't that out of this world, to be honest. You've got Slaughterous Might. You add 1 to the rend characteristic of the target's melee weapons for the rest of the battle. Also juicy. I actually don't think, Ryan, that there is anything in the core rules that we've seen so far, at least, that prohibits you from stacking this.
No, yeah, you can totally stack it.
That is very nice. And a little bit crazy. And 6 is you pick any other effect. So I think 5 is already decently strong, and I like the picking any other effect. It just feels a little bit to me like I wanted something super massively cool, but I understand that how often this can proc, you can't actually go much further than adding 1 to the rent, especially if it's a stackable profile. So yeah, a lot of great stuff here. I like that it's once per turn now, like you can get it multiple times. I don't actually know how the current iteration of it is right now, Ryan, but definitely before there have been many cases where this rule only allowed you to affect 1 of your units. So you could never target a unit twice. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so let's talk about the changes then.
Yeah.
So this is, as it currently here is worded, is once per turn, end of any turn, but in the third edition book, it's at the end of any phase. So in theory, you could have triggered it multiple times in a turn, but realistically, you still had to destroy a unit, or there's another condition, but we'll get to it. So I'd say more realistically, it could go off max twice per turn before,
Mm.
but I don't think it was really going to happen much. Now let's get into which units were eligible for it. Previously, it was just heroes or slaves to darkness units with the eye of the gods keyword. Now this is kind of a you got to go do a little journey to figure out who that is. It was largely, almost exclusively heroes
Yeah.
that had the Eye of the Gods keyword, but not every hero had it. And then, and so now every hero does.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well,
then,
not every non-hero monster.
what? Non-hero Yeah, yeah, I said every hero, but that would
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
implicitly be.
Yeah, you already mean the just a keyword hero. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, yeah, even what you just said is a monster that isn't a hero, right? So every hero is automatically qualified for this, and that wasn't always the case. That would include Archeon, that would include the Demon Prince, and if I'm not mistaken, previously they couldn't do that. Let me double check real quick. No, because they had already ascended. So the idea of Eye of the Gods was that it was like their path to becoming like a god or like a greater demon kind of thing. And so the Demon Prince didn't have it either, and now they do.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I mixed that up. That's why I interrupted you. I thought it said that non-hero monsters could, well, hero monsters could not be targeted, but non-hero monsters cannot be targeted. So standard monsters cannot be targeted. They can only be targeted if they're hero monsters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they
Okay.
have
So
to
I
have them.
understand now. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think what they're trying to say is beasts and monsters just
Yeah.
running around without a leader don't have enough brains to achieve this.
Yeah. That makes much more sense. I was like, I don't understand why hero monsters would not get that, and a regular monster would.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's one change right there. And another way to get Eye of the Gods before was what I said about being undivided. So that has nothing to do with it anymore. But
Yeah.
if you think about it, being undivided doesn't need to give that anymore because it's automatically for all the regular units that could have qualified. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why it gets +1 to wound. So it's not actually a nerf or anything. And the rerolls, like you mentioned, you get to reroll for everyone if you want. So that was only for undivided heroes formerly. So it's interesting that they moved this around. So I see that as a buff.
Yeah.
Um, now, so more units are getting it in theory. Or more units are eligible for it, I should say. But the way that you had to trigger it, there were two main ways. So you had to be this Eye of the Gods thing, and that's the first condition. But then you have to have killed an enemy hero or a monster. So that there weren't a whole lot of options for that condition to trigger the Eye of the Gods thing. And then the other way you did it, and this is gone, so this is a nerf, was that you had to gain control of an objective previously controlled by your opponent. And that was something that was a lot easier to achieve. So that's why I said you could get it twice per turn. Like, say you killed something, a hero or a monster in your combat phase, and then at the end of the turn, you gain control of an objective. So you could technically roll twice.
Yeah.
It's also worth saying that that Chosen used to be able to roll on this from like the beginning of the game or whatever. Now, the table was also more complicated because heroes got to go higher on the table, and then
Mm.
regular non-hero units were
Yes,
lower.
that's the one. Yeah.
Some
Mm-hmm.
things that fell off the table were becoming a chaos spawn. That's totally gone. The closest thing you have now is taking D3 mortal damage. You could have, on the other side of the table, you could become a demon prince, which was kind of confusing and kind of forced people to bring a demon prince just in case it happened.
Yeah.
And the demon prince wasn't even that good. He definitely got a little bit better with this. What
Definitely.
was this
Yeah.
say? Let's see. Otherwise, the healing got better. It used to be D3 instead of 3. There was a spell ignore, though, like a one-off spell ignore that's gone. +1 to charge rolls is gone. The ward has been condensed into one ability. It was a lower roll was a 6 and another roll was a 5. The rend is the same. There was one that could make you a wizard until the end of the game, or just a wizard for the rest of the game. Um, yeah, and then we always had the choice if you rolled high enough to be able to choose what you wanted. So overall, I think this is great. And like you said, there are a lot of units that have a 6+ ward already. So you could either bump them immediately to a 5, or if you got this twice on a unit, you could bump them to of 5 by doing it in 2 different instances. The real question is, how often are your units going to kill enemy units? And I don't know. It depends on your opponent, right? Sometimes this is going to, because the objective thing is totally gone. That was a more easy to guarantee thing. And there was also, if I'm not mistaken, a spell that would allow like the wizard to roll on the table.
Yeah.
We'll have to see if that happens. So
Mhm.
overall, what are your thoughts about this?
I really like it. It's slick, it's clean, it's clear, and it's actually not that hard to understand as an opponent either. You just like half of the effects are something you don't have to memorize. There's no effect, there's pick any other effect, and there's healing. That's something that you never have to memorize because it just happens and then it's done. The other three are things that are not very difficult to keep in mind. I think it'll be some work for the slave players to mark that on their units in some shape or form. But I like how it still feels very flavorful, and you can get rewarded multiple times. And it's not only heroes now and specific units; it's most everything. So overall, I think this is very nice. I like the system a lot.
Yeah, if I was a slaves player, I would not be disappointed. Um, they did lose a couple other battle traits. They lost heroic actions. One was a like to boost your spell casting to the heavens,
Yeah.
and then another one was to make you roll twice or 2 dice and pick one of for the eye of the gods.
Hmm.
And then another one was the another thing they lost was ensorcelled banners, which you it counted as like a unique enhancement. So you got one for free, and then
Yeah.
you could take another one if you did the right kind of battalion. The banners are really strong. So I'm gonna, if I had to guess, I would say most people would probably say of all the battle traits, that's the one that hurts the most.
Hmm.
Technically, we don't know that they're gone because there could be unique enhancements. We just haven't seen any evidence of mount traits or banners or holy commands from Stormcast seem to be gone. So I wouldn't say it's definitely gone, but right now we don't know for
Yeah,
sure.
most likely though.
The one other thing that I want to mention before we go to the next stuff is that they did gain a faction terrain piece. If you've been keeping up with what's been going on, so Slaves has got a faction terrain piece, which is basically a built-in battle trait. So we don't know what that's going to do. We know what it does now,
It's a
but
barricade thing, right?
yeah, the big, really pretty big one. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty exciting. So it might make up for the banners. Who knows? So yeah,
Yeah. Overall, I can also see that for the Path to Glory guys out there, I think they might actually expand on this table a little bit because in previous iterations, there's always been like a ton of options. And as you mentioned, you had the spawn option, obviously, in the Demon Prince and so on and so on. But all of those things always kind of felt a little bit more narrative inspired to me. And in my casual games, that's fun. I like that. But having that feel bad of turning your hero into a spawn is just something that I would not wish on anyone, not even on my opponent. So I'm glad that's gone. But I do hope that they retain that in some way, shape, or form in a narrative setting. Because it's
sure.
still it's like a cool thing to talk about, right? In your stories with your friends, like oh my hero turned into a spawn, or my hero turned into a demon prince.
Yeah, I could see that totally being a thing. I don't keep up with Path to Glory at all.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah. Okay, so want to take a look at the battle formation?
Yeah,
You want to cover this one?
sure. So this one actually took me by surprise a little bit because there's nothing interacting with your units, or not a lot, at least not as in with the previous stuff. Is you usually saw something like a buff to your units, but this is just like an AOE thing that they do. So once per turn, at the end of your turn, you get to do the Ironclad Onslaught. So you pick an objective that is contested by any friendly units to be the target. You place the filed token next to the target objective. Then roll a d3 for each enemy unit contesting an objective that has the file token. On a 2+, inflict an amount of mortal damage on that enemy unit equal to the roll. I think this is super cool. It's really, really cool because in a big battle with a lot of objectives, that would actually mean that you could potentially tag multiple objectives throughout the battle. There's also no real way to take away the file token, it seems. So that's interesting. It's at the end of your turn only, though. So you're only ever getting to tag max 5 objectives in a normal standard play game. But yeah, it's neat. That being said, I don't think it's strong, but it's cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking this might actually be stronger than the Nurgle ability in certain
Sure,
circumstances
yeah,
because
I can
because
see
you
that.
know
Yeah,
because you know you're going to put like people need to be on objectives,
yeah,
and then now you don't even have to control the objective. You just have to contest it to make it defiled, and then it just keeps snowballing. If you can grab a new objective and make it defiled every turn, then you're just making it so good luck. If you go on that thing, you're gonna take wounds. It's like imagine what's it? Fountains of Frost is a mission right now that does something kind of similar.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I'm always scared of that objective. Like I don't want a hero with only health on that objective, when it's going to go off. So
That's fair. Yeah,
I don't know. I think it might be strong. It just depends on how easily you can put a body on that objective to be at the end of your turn and not be dead, so that you can
yeah,
make it to 5.
yeah.
Yeah. So
It's gonna greatly depend on the mission as well, right? How impactful that's gonna be.
yeah, I think the only way to interact with this would be if there's a mission that takes objectives off the table.
Yeah,
Um, but otherwise, yeah, I think it's pretty strong.
yeah. For your
Um,
small heroes, for sure, that's scary.
yeah,
But other than that, it's only, well, it's not only, but it's triggering 66% of the time on units, and I wouldn't be necessarily afraid of taking D3 mortal damage on a generic unit, but on smaller heroes, for sure, that's scary. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah, so
But
they
I don't
they
not
they put a
bad.
little this spoiler here on the bottom. Do you want to talk about that one real quick, or?
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, so there's three others. Obviously, there is one that where warlords put their grudges aside to stake their claim on enemy territory. Um, I don't really know what that means, Ryan.
I mean, they've always had a thing where the I forget what the name of the faction was, but where it kind of like what Slanesh does, where everyone wants to be the leader.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it might
The
have some
Pretenders,
reference to that.
like the
No, I
Slash
mean,
version of the Pretenders.
yeah, but I
Yeah.
forget what it was called in the Slaves before.
Mm.
Where they used to all be able to have a command trait that was kind of cool in like the second edition book. So
Yeah.
it might be a reference to that.
Yeah. Then you got one that kind of emphasizes the savage, bestial part of chaos, where you get to buff your beasts and monsters with a demon prince, which I think is super cool.
Yeah,
And then the one that I kind of expected in some shape or form, it's something that interacts with the new pretty dark oath models. And as far as I understand it, it's just going to be dark oath recursion, so a way of returning your slain dark oath models or units.
yeah, and that's the thing that, if I'm not mistaken, in their current version of their army that they've gotten recently, they've got something like that already on some
Yeah.
of the war scrolls, and then also, I forget what it was called, Marauders or whatever it was, that Ravagers, that sub faction had a recursion
Yeah.
mechanic too. So,
I really like that idea about or for Dark Oath, because their battle scrolls, we're gonna see one in a bit. They're fine. They're good enough to be a cheap chaff unit to be in your army. But if you get to return those models, that's kind of interesting.
yeah, definitely.
So yeah, looking like a very cool set of battle formation. I'm curious what the actual rules are gonna turn out to be for those three.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the other ones are going to do, but I actually think the one they're showing today is totally a default setting that I'd be okay with.
Yeah, it's definitely viable for sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's as you mentioned, right? It could stack to very scary degrees. um,
yeah.
so yeah, I can definitely see it doing some work. Okay, onto the Arcana and incantations. So it doesn't say here that you get more than one spell lore, so there's nothing about that. But the spell that you get is super juicy. So from the Lord of the Damned, you get a demonic speed spell on a 7 to cast. You pick a friendly Slaves to Darkness wizard to cast this spell, and then you pick a visible friendly Slaves to Darkness unit wholly within 12 inches to be the target. And on a 7 or more, for the rest of the turn, you add 1 to the number of dice rolled when making charge rolls for the target to a maximum of 3. That is a very nice ability.
Yeah, so this got buffed in two ways. The most obvious is that it used to only be able to target units with mounts. So now it's anyone in your army, which is great. And then the second thing that's really obvious is that you can use it on the same turn as a countercharge.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could cast it as magical intervention and then countercharge with 3d6, which is really sweet. That said, there's kind of like a sub point that's worth mentioning, is that one of the sub factions, what was it? uh, was it Knights of the Empty Throne or Host of the Ever Chosen? One of the other. Oh, it was Knights of the Empty Throne. Used to give mounted units run and still charge, and we have no reason to think that that's still going to be here. So this spell was always there, in addition to having run and charge. So that might be gone, but still, this spell got a buff, especially considering that you can now do it in your opponent's turn.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, so the other two spells are going to be one spell is going to curse your opponents at the cost of suffering harm themselves. So does that mean that your own wizards are going to harm themselves, but then your opponents are going to suffer for it as well?
there was always, yeah, there was a very high risk reward, or not very, but it was a high risk reward spell. I can't remember exactly what it did. It was super low casting value, I think, and then had a chance to do damage to yourself. So that's probably what that's referring to.
Yeah, and the last sentence here kind of refers to something that might interact with movement, which I think is always super powerful. All in all, Ryan, I think it's pretty cool. You probably got one spell that's gonna deal some mortal wounds in somewhere or debuff you. You've got a 3d6 charge thing, and then you've got a spell that's gonna reduce movement. So overall, a pretty nice tool set, right?
Yeah, and they've got their own set of endless spells too, so that could be fun.
Yeah. Cool. We sadly don't get to see anything about those endless spells, which is sad. But I think they gave us some very interesting war scrolls, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Not Archeon, but we did get to see, or we do get to see Be'lakor. Do you want to tackle a profile, or shall I quickly cover it and then you talk when you think there's a lot of interesting stuff to say?
Well, it's I can just talk about the weird thing is not much of what made him amazing is changed. That's kind of the too long didn't read.
Exactly,
Like
yeah.
he's go through some of the rules and then I'll fill in when we get to anything
Yeah.
that
So pretty quickly, his wheel, his stat wheel and melee weapons are kind of nice. 14-inch movement, 14 health, 4-up save that remains unmodifiable in any shape or form. So he's gonna be on a 4-up all the time. 10 control, which is nice, 5 more than he usually had. His attack profile is pretty decent. Keep in mind he's undivided, so he gets +1 to wound against heroes and monsters. So that's actually a 2 to wound on the Blade of Shadows. The auto wound's pretty nice since it has a lot of attacks. But then the thing that makes him Be'lakor and why you would actually take him seems to be just as effective as before, or maybe even more so, Ryan. So the Dark Master ability here, once per battle as it was before in your enemy hero phase, you pick one visible enemy unit to be the target. So that could be any target that you can see. There's no range. It also doesn't stipulate in what turn that can happen, so you could do it whenever you want it. Until the start of your next turn, each time the target is picked to use an ability, roll a dice as a reaction. On a 3+, that ability has no effect. I mean, this just got flat out better, right?
I could see it going. I could see argument both ways because before it was for the whole turn, so it was more high risk reward. If you got the roll, then you knew for a fact they weren't doing anything in that phase each turn. And this one is per ability, which depends on how many more things are abilities. Obviously, everything's ability now, but the list was relatively extensive. What it included before. Um, I think it did get buffed personally, and I think it's actually less of a feel bad because since you're rolling for every single time you use an
Yeah,
ability, it's going to take up more time, but it does give someone the hope that maybe they can do something in a phase if they
exactly.
get Bellacord. So I think it's better for the game. And it's also worth pointing out that Bellacore was probably the most overused ally option in any army because all the Chaos armies could basically take him, almost all of them. And he was just such a negative impact on. I mean, it was great. He was fantastic, but I have a feeling allies might be going away the way that we've known them. And if that's the case, then he lives where he should be living, which is in Slaves to Darkness. And I'm much more okay with it if that's just a thing you have to expect when you're playing slaves.
Yeah. Yeah, the fact that it's on any ability though, and since everything is an ability, that's very good.
Yeah.
And just as before, you kind of want to, if you're going second, or first, sorry, you want to give your opponent potentially double turns, so you get to use, you get the value of this ability for 2 turns, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the best.
So that's still a
Now,
thing.
of course, we know that taking a double turn is even more punished than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the only way that's usually going to happen is if you make it happen.
Yeah.
But obviously that was half the time anyway what people did. So uh, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at the once per turn rampage, um, yeah, this is new. It's him, and then picking two other slaves to dark units that are in combat range, so within 3 inch of him. And then on a you roll for each. It's not all or nothing. On a 4 up, they have strike first. I actually think this is a great rampage because we've seen some strike first on a 4 up abilities that only hit one unit.
Uh-huh.
But the fact that you get to do three attempts here is means someone's probably getting it.
Yeah. So, Ryan, do you know whether the rampage keyword actually means that you yourself have to be in combat?
Um, let's see. This unit up to 200 units within this. I don't know. I don't know.
Rampage might
Um,
be some, in the core rules, there might be something about rampages only being able to proc if they're in combat. But if it doesn't, then that's kind of nice because you could actually wall off your Bellicor with two of your units. And as long as they are in combat and he's within 3 inches of those units that he's gonna buff, he could actually still give them strike first without risking his life himself. So that's kind of neat.
well, well, if I'm not mistaken, Shalaxi's rampage was when Shalaxi's implicitly not in combat.
There we go.
That was within 9 inches of a hero, and then you got to charge. So I think on the surface, unless it says that combat phase rampages must happen if you're within combat range of an enemy, then I think you could.
Mm-hmm.
This does have to be in the enemy combat phase, though. So
Yeah,
it means you're only getting it 5 times per game instead of 10
yeah.
max. But and then the spell has gotten buffed. It used to be just a one unit got -1 from wound to wound on their attacks. Now it's -1 to hit, and their combat attacks cannot score critical hits, which can be really strong on certain units. Depends on
Mm-hmm.
what kind of unit it is. So I only see this as a buff, and he's still a 2 caster. He's a war master now, which he didn't used to be. Um, so, and then I guess I should talk real quickly about the profile here. His movement stayed on its top bracket, which is great. Like you said, his control being 10. I mean, the only other person we've seen that has that of this kind of price, well, not even price range. Nagash is probably 2 times as expensive as Belcor, if not more. That's the only other model we've seen with such a high control score that isn't a Gargant, I guess.
Yeah.
And the fact that he still has a guaranteed control score that's the same as a Gargant once it gets bracketed, I think is amazing. I could definitely see running Bellicor even more now. And then the weapon profiles, let's see, I did the math on these. And he got a 6+ ward. He didn't used to have that either, as far as I'm aware. Yeah, so on the top, comparing his main weapon, the top one that brackets, it's got auto wound now, so that's good. It went up a bit from what it used to be on the old former top bracket, and then if it gets bracketed somewhere between the second and third bracket before, and then the other attack, if he's on the charge, it's way better than it would have used to be. So I think Bellicor's looking great, personally.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
I just I just hope he's not allyable, because then you've just got an even better version of this war scroll. Or maybe he's over 400 points and that's still a cutoff point. So who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, there's just nothing on this war scroll that I don't like.
I
Everything
mean,
is everything is good.
having an unrendable 4-up save and then a 6+ ward is
Yeah.
fantastic. So
Yeah, and you actually increase this guy's yeah, you could, right? He could be up for the Eye of the Gods.
yeah. So you can put him up to 5.
Yeah.
That's something new he's got. There's nothing I've seen yet today that makes me think that he can't get Eye of the Gods. So you can buff his rend or whatever the other ones were.
Man,
So,
getting multiple rend buffs on that Blade of Shadows is whew,
mm-hmm.
very nice.
Oh yeah.
Okay, the Demon Prince. I am so happy that they include this guy, and he's got a pretty nice glow up. I feel like he deserved it because he got this gorgeous new model, and he was absolutely terrible from the get go. And now I feel like they finally fixed him a little bit, at least. He's on a 3-up save, which is very nice in this climate of 4th edition. 10 health though, so that means there's no lookouts or stuff happening for him. 5 control, which is neat because he's not a monster, but he still gets the 5 control thing. An 8-inch move, but you could actually improve this to a 10-inch move if you take the wings instead of the trophy rack. And then he also gets fly. You can decide to give him any mark of chaos, and his Hellforged weapons are also very nice. 6 attacks, 3s, 1 rend, and 3 damage, and a crit mortal. So that means that every 6 is straight up 3 mortal damage. Wow.
Yeah.
And then you still haven't really considered the fact that you will get the bonus from the Mark of Chaos. So, you could either improve his wound rolls by 1 versus monsters or heroes. You could give him 1 extra attack, which I would probably not opt for, to be honest. But that's maybe just me. His awards against magic could be juicy. I think I would probably go for the Nurgle or Slanesh one. -1 to wound or +1 to run and charge, I think it was. Yeah. Pretty cool stuff. And then you're still not done because you could still get affected by his by the Eye of the God stable and improving the rent and so on and so on and so on. So that's pretty good. As I mentioned, when you choose him you put him in your army composition, you either give him wings or the trophy rack. So wings would improve his move and give him fly, and the trophy rack would give him anti-hero +1 rends on top of possibly the undivided keywords and make him a hero killer maybe.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. And then you got the Ruinous Favor. You can only do this in your hero phase, but it's not once per army. So you could actually have multiple Demon Princes doing this ability. You pick a friendly, non-unique unit, wholly within 12 inches of this unit that shares a Mark of Chaos keyword with this unit to be the target. Roll a dice on a 3+. The target can immediately use the Eye of the Gods ability as if it were the end of the turn and they had destroyed an enemy unit this turn. Man, he could actually do it on himself.
Yep. As far as I'm reading. Yeah. And he didn't used to be able to use Eye of the Gods either. So it's not only that he's enabling it, but he's also enabling it for himself. So even if you don't take any other units that are matching his Mark of Chaos, he's at least buffing himself up 2 out of every 3 attempts that you're doing. So I think that ability alone might be worth his price, but he's actually pretty tanky. 10 wounds, a 3-up save, 6+ ward that can get better. Not bad. The output is dependent on which profile he used to have 3 profiles, and before that he had all of the profiles, and then they felt bad for him and they boosted his profiles. His profile is mainly an upgrade. It depends on what you're comparing it to, what kind of save and which one of the profiles before, but in general it's an upgrade, especially considering he can get Eye of the God stuff now. Yeah, and he lost his heroic actions, but honestly, they were almost not usable. They were so bad,
Yeah.
and it was eating up a much better heroic action because you can only do 1 heroic action per turn. So you were having to give up one of the better Slaves of Darkness-y ones. So I think in general, this guy's just better. I wish the wings still made him 12-inch flying instead of 10 now, but because 2 + 2 inches doesn't seem like it does that much, but it's still something.
The fly is also super, super good.
Yeah, there's not a lot of flyers in this army unless they're big. And like you said, he's a 5 control non-monster, which is interesting. But yeah, I like him. And they said there's going to be a faction built around them. So now, if I were to play slaves, I do have a good chunk of slaves that I was using as like coalition for Tzeentch. If I were to play slaves, I'd probably go for the monster mashy, the beasts one.
That's so cool. You get all those weird little monsters that came out for Warcry. You add some demon princes into the mix. You add some units that you think are cool, and you just run with it. It's just Hero Hammer, Monster Hammer.
Yeah, very cool.
I like that a lot. I don't know whether it would be good for capturing objectives and all that stuff, but yeah. I mean, and 2 demon princes going like hand in hand, I would say, with the same mark, so they could potentially buff each other. Or you can't stack the same buff on the same unit, can you?
you can't receive it twice.
Yeah, okay.
No, in one
So
turn. Yeah.
buffing each other or buffing themselves is the same thing. But both with fly and then potentially the battle formation that we've seen, the ironclad thing, they would be able to tag objectives pretty easily
Yeah.
and defend them quite formidably as well with 3-up save and 6-up wards.
Definitely. I think it's finally a time we might actually see Demon Princes on the
Yeah,
table.
imagine running 2 Demon Princes, both Mark of Nurgle for the -1 to wound, 3-up save, buffing themselves with the Eye of the God Sable to increase their ward to 5-up, and then just sitting on some objectives or just slapping things.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
It's
I
it's
think there's
chaos.
definitely.
It's your Chaos Knight nightmare, right? But now with damage as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of Chaos Knights, maybe let's move on to those
That was my
guys.
yeah, that was my attempt. So nice little segue here into the Chaos Knights. Um, these are the Chaos variant of Blood Knights. I feel a little bit less cool when it comes to abilities, but very reliable still. So a 10-inch move, 4 health, pretty impressive. 3-up save still. Woohoo, Ryan.
Yeah.
Only 1 control, luckily. You still get to give them any Mark of Chaos, so you could give them the Nurgle Mark of Chaos for -1 to wound. Their ability is super lame, I'm not gonna lie. I was super disappointed by this because it's just a weapon ability that they didn't put on the weapons anymore because they wanted to give an ability to these guys because they promised that every war scroll would at least have 1 ability. But their Cursed Lance are kind of okay. 3 attacks, 3 threes, 1 rend and 1 damage, or potentially 2 damage on the charge. And then you would also have to improve the rend by 1 if they made a charge. So that's interesting. That profile is pretty good though, right, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean it all that's the same except they got +1 to hit. So their output only got better.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and by +1 to hit, I mean from what it used to be a 4+.
Yeah.
The steed got a little worse, but not not meaningfully so. And them getting +1 health further reinforces this is a tank unit.
Yeah.
Like it's going to do enough on the charge, but honestly, it's not going anywhere anytime soon. They lost their 5-up ward against Mortal Wounds, but and that was really great. Don't get me wrong, but I to me that always felt unnecessary. And then you had to remember, it's not a normal ward, this, that, or the
Mm.
other. I have a feeling Vanguard and Chaos Warriors are losing that too. We'll see Chaos Warriors spearhead scroll, but that doesn't necessarily mean they lost it. But I think that's okay. I think that makes this unit a little easier to price.
Yeah.
And it makes them have a more defined. Well, the role was still tanky, of course, but I think it kind of puts them in a more reasonable place. I see it as a totally fine exchange for getting +1 health, let's say, and still having an amazing save.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, overall a pretty solid war scroll. A little bit plain, but very solid.
Yeah, yeah, and they can get that mark of chaos, or sorry, Eye of the God stuff without having been, what's it called, undivided. So now they get to have their cake and eat it too. They don't
Yeah.
have the banner anymore, probably, but it's still solid.
Yeah, and remember, if you're bringing a Demon Prince, you could actually target these guys for the Eye of the Gods and potentially give them a 6-up ward if you manage that.
Sure,
So
or
there's
keep
still
buffing
ways to
their
make them
Rend up,
tanky.
or put them on Rend 3 on the charge.
Yep.
Why not?
Yeah, imagine a
Yeah.
block of 10 of these guys, 40 wounds, 3-up save, and any form of either improved rend or a ward save. Man.
Yeah, and with a 4 health characteristic, healing 3 isn't bad because it means it actually will do something. Whereas before on 3 health, you were only getting to use 2 out of 3 of those
Yeah,
points
and
to
with
heal.
combat ranges being
Yeah.
3 inches now for weapons, you're gonna get those 10 models into combat for sure.
Well, that was one of the best things they had on their war scroll was that they could fight within a half inch of a half inch, like a
Okay.
model that was already. But so that wasn't really a problem. But they also lost their musician's cool ability that if you rolled a charge, and it was one of the dice, you could change one of the dice to a 4,
Mm.
the lowest dice. So that helped guarantee you got in. But in any case, they're still good.
Yeah, you
I
have
wouldn't be
the
concerned about it.
demonic speed now to give them 3 to 6 charge.
Yeah, that we always had, but because they were on mounts. But
Yeah,
I still think this unit's good, even if
yeah.
they lost a thing or
Yeah,
two.
the only thing I don't like about this war scroll is the little elf head on the armor of the mount there.
Oh yeah.
Such disrespect. I hope that's not a Lumineth elf. It's gonna be,
Oh,
and
it's
it needs to be like a city's elf or something like that. Filthy city's elves.
all right. Yeah.
The
I gotta
Marauders.
keep going. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I'm
So
really happy
this
they showed us these guys.
Yeah, it's interesting because they just this is a new unit. I know it seems like it's not because we always had Marauders, but the Dark Oath stuff that just came out is basically replacing all that for all intents and purposes, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's interesting to see what a unit that they just released, how much it changed or didn't change. So walk us through the profile, and then I'll update us on that.
Yeah. So Marauders were very cheap in third edition. They are your fodder units. They're still that. 5 up save, only 1 health, 5-inch move, and 1 control. Their weapon profiles aren't really amazing, but remember there's still a lot of ways to buff this. They're also undivided, so they're getting +1 on their wounds versus heroes and monsters. And Marauders were always a kind of unit that you would have to, you either didn't care about them enough to buff them and then you just threw them in there, or you included some Marauder heroes to buff them or increase their efficiency. So being on 2 attacks, 4 to hit, and 3 to wounds is kind of okay, especially since there's way to increase their rend uh, on their war scroll, but as well as with your battle trains and so on. So once per battle in any charge phase, if you've made a unmodified charge roll of an 8 plus, you add 1 to the rend characteristic of this unit's weapons for the rest of the battle. Now, Ryan, if you add 1d6 to your charges with demonic speed, for example, does that still count as unmodified?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I imagine it does, but
I don't know. Typically, when you've changed dice or done things in a different way, it counts.
yeah,
But we'll see.
yeah. Which is a neat ability. I don't think you would actually care that much if it doesn't actually happen for you, because they're not that kind of unit in my eyes, at least.
Yeah.
And then you've got the glorious death ability. I think they had this on their previous war scroll, didn't they? Something like this.
Well, the previous is the current new one.
Yeah,
So if that's what you're referring to, then yes.
yeah, that's what I was referring to. Yeah. So while this unit is wholly within 12 inches of any friendly Dark Oath heroes, so here you go, you got the hero synergy. Each time a model in this unit is slain by a combat attack, and that model was in combat with the attacking unit, roll a dice on a 5 plus, inflict 1 mortal damage on the attacking unit after fight ability has been resolved. So it's basically some form of fight on death, but you don't actually get to fight, you just deal 1 mortal damage, which with these guys' profile is probably better than than rolling your stuff anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. The wording on that rule got changed just a little bit so that it's more specific about what you have to target and whether they qualify, but in general it's the same. And then the charge rule changed in the sense that it's once per battle, but it was always that implicitly because it's still you don't have to say it before you attempt it, it's after you've done it, and then it was their oath. So all the Dark Oath units typically have an oath that they're trying to fulfill by the end of the game to get a buff. And so I have a feeling this is exactly what the format's going to look like on all the other Dark Oath things. It'll be a once per battle at some point, and it checks to see if you met a condition. It just is trying to the once per battle is just saying you can't do it again if you charge on a 8 plus on another turn. It used to be a 7 plus, so it got nerfed a little bit that way. So they received a slight nerf from their newest version that they've got, but keep in mind they're now Eye of the Gods like eligible, so that's pretty good. I think. I mean, they always were if they were undivided, I guess, but it's just I think there's going to be more ways to make these guys work with all the new rules in the game as well, like counter charge and things we got. So overall, I think the unit did just fine transitioning from their super recent War Scroll into 4th edition.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I think, especially since it's a dirt cheap unit, or it's probably still going to be, with the recursion as well, the possible recursion from the battle formation, I think you will see these guys a lot.
Yeah. If you're
Uh,
playing that type of army, for sure. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so we've got the very basic Chaos Warriors Spearhead War Scroll. So keep in mind, Spearhead War Scrolls tend to change quite a lot, or they could at least change quite a lot. So these guys are on a 3+ save, which is probably the best thing on this very short War Scroll. 2 health, 5-inch move. They're basically Stormcast, but evil. Their profile is also very much the same, and some Stormcasts have this ability to better defend objectives, and these guys have ways to better take objectives. So with Bringers of Desolation, add 1 to wound rolls for combat attacks that made by this unit that target an enemy that is contesting objective you do not control. Pretty
Yeah, so that
clean.
yeah, it used to be +1 attack, and it used to also trigger wholly within enemy territory and
Yeah.
wholly within 12 inches of an objective. So you didn't even have to be on the objective, and now the
Yeah.
objective is smaller.
That might
Um,
still be the case actually, but because the Spearhead battles are on such small tables.
yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
But honestly, the output is being +1 to wound and +1 attack. I'd rather the attack. It was a little bit better. It's comparing 1 and 1/9 versus 1 and 3/9. So it went up 2/9 at the same rend. So it's not a huge difference. And the fact that they're like pretty tanky, I think. And remember, unlike Stormcast, can keep getting Eye of the Gods things.
Yeah.
So and then obviously the buffs for being a certain mark, where there's no reason to think they don't have all 5 marks
Yeah, they're
available.
gonna have the marks. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They did lose the 5-up mortal wound thing that the knights lost, probably. I mean, like we don't see it officially on here, of course, but that doesn't mean it couldn't be. But I fully expect they don't have that 5-up mortal wound shrug.
Yeah.
But it's fine. Yeah.
Okay,
So
so guys, that brings us to the end of this Factious Focus review. Ryan, thank you for straining your voice a little bit longer and still coming up with all of these, all of this thorough research that you put into it. Guys, please leave a comment and a like to reward Ryan for his hard work, because every day we're like, okay, at what time are you free? And Ryan's like, yeah, I need a couple more minutes to do my calculations and my comparisons. So Ryan puts a lot of effort into these videos. So thank you so much, Ryan, and thank you all for watching our videos once again. Tomorrow is the Last Destruction Army, the Iron Jaws, and then we only have Khorne and Sylvaneth left. And your bet, Ryan, is on Sylvaneth on Friday, right?
no, I'm thinking Thursday now that we have a Chaos God on Tuesday. I think they're not going to put them as close together.
Yeah.
So maybe it'll be Khorne on Friday, but we'll see. But thanks for your compliments. I really appreciate it. I put the work in because I care, and I'm really excited about 4th edition. And I also really like seeing what's changed. On that note, I have a video that I'm planning on making as soon as these are all done, where I compare at least Stormcast, Skaven, and Lumineth, the 3 armies that have the most units we've seen, in terms of how their melee and missile output changed from 3rd edition to 4th edition mathematically. So keep an eye out for that one. That'll be coming out sometime between when these faction focuses are done and when 4th edition comes out.
Yeah. Well, guys, see you tomorrow for the next one. Bye-bye.